Welcome to The Pulse. I'm Rup Raj. No doubt this news cycle moves at breakneck speed, and that's why we're here to help you make sense of it all. So toss that phone aside and hang out with us for the next half hour as we talk all things people, power, and politics. This person in the news, Elon Musk, officially leaving the Trump administration. But his success in D.C. depends on who you ask. We're debating his and Doge's legacy with Democrat Sherry Gay-Degnago and Republican Terry Johnson. This comes on the heels of a youth Job Corps program shutting down, kicking kids out of the program, some living at the facility. The reason, early indications, is because of cuts to the Labor Department. We'll dive in on the impact. And by the way, that youth center is right here in Detroit. And we're talking tariffs with former auto supply executive Jan Griffiths, the president announcing he's doubling tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25 to 50%. And there's a lot of questions about China's future with this tariff deal. She's answering your questions. So many of you ask questions. We actually grabbed those questions. We're going to ask those questions to Jan, and I want to tell you how it could impact the auto industry. But we begin at the nation's highest court, where Supreme Court justices allowed the Trump administration to strip temporary legal protections for hundreds of thousands of migrants. This could possibly expose them to deportation. So here's what we know. The ruling lifts a lower court order keeping humanitarian parole protections in place. It impacts more than 500,000 migrants from 4 different countries: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The court didn't say why it ruled this way, but we should point out that's typical for cases on an emergency docket. It comes after a similar decision involving 350,000 migrants from Venezuela. Former President Biden making his first public appearance since doctors diagnosed him with cancer 2 weeks ago. You'll remember it's an aggressive form of prostate cancer that spread to his bones. Biden said he's feeling good, and the expectation is he's going to beat it. He spoke at a gathering marking Memorial Day, where he both honored the troops and lamented how divided our nation's politics had become.
Our troops don't wear a uniform that says I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. It says I'm an American. I'm an American. That's who I am. I'm serious about this. I'm not joking. And folks, our politics has become, as I said, so divided. They wear the uniform of the United States of America, the only nation in the world, literally, not fake, the only nation in the world founded on an idea. An idea. Every nation was founded on geography, ethnicity, some unifying principle, but not an idea. The idea of America was founded on, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
Now, he also said it was a really personal day for him and his family, marking 10 years since his son Beau died of brain cancer. Just days after NPR sues the Trump administration over his order stripping federal funds, PBS is doing the same thing. The public television network making similar arguments as NPR is, basically saying he's violating their First Amendment rights. The president and other Republicans have claimed the news programming of both networks has a liberal bias. PBS says it disputes that claim, but regardless, the administration is engaging in what it calls viewpoint discrimination. I asked you when the NPR lawsuit was filed how important that outlet is to you, and so many of you had so much to say, including the ghost of Lydia Child. It's a daily listen for me, she says. It gives me insight into what's happening around the globe in a way that's more nuanced and in-depth than many other outlets. Old School says the NPR is real and does not bend to the will of any party, which is exactly why this administration wants to make cuts. Michelle says, I used to like NPR and listened regularly. I feel like they are anti-Trump, anti-conservative, and I no longer listen to them. I don't feel they are unbiased. The only pieces I listen to are the ones on K-12 education or literacy. And Julie says, very important. They provide quality, in-depth reporting on such a wide range of issues, culture, science, current events. And Therese says, I've never liked NPR. The monotone broadcasts drive me insane. Well, speaking of President Trump, he officially said goodbye to Elon Musk in the Oval Office. Musk's time as special government employee is up, ending a chapter of layoffs, lawsuits, and the gunning of government agencies in his tenure running the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, the president gave him a gold key and credited him with changing the way government is run. Musk himself says while his work is ending, he'll be back.
The team will only grow stronger over time. The Doge influence will only grow stronger. I'd liken it to sort of Buddhism. It's like a way of life. So it is permeating throughout the government, and I'm confident that over time we'll see $1 trillion of savings and a reduction in $1 trillion of waste and fraud reduction.
Thousands of employees were fired or pushed out, and the U.S. Agency for International Development was effectively dismantled. The agency was a lifeline for people suffering through poverty all over the world. Now, Elon Musk claims there was a lot of waste, a lot of fraud there. Boston University researchers estimate hundreds of thousands have died already because of those cuts. Now, take you back to the Mackinac Policy Conference just for a second. I just got back this afternoon, a few hours ago. A lot happened there the last few days. The race for Detroit mayor took center stage as the candidates hit the debate stage. Now, we didn't get into it last night because of time constraints, but since this is such a key race, not only for Southeast Michigan, but the state as a whole, we wanted to give you a look at some of what was said on that stage. And it's interesting because they didn't just talk about Detroit, but Detroit's impact on the state. One major topic, public safety in the city. Take a listen.
We need a robust mental health strategy, partnering with DWIN, who I can't wait to continue to work with James White on to ensure that we're addressing people who have mental health crises, that they get the treatment that they need, or not arrested for things in which they need actual treatment for.
We need to partner with the schools to create job opportunities and career pathways for people from cradle to career and beyond. And yes, we need community policing to be a philosophy, not just a few officers walking the beat.
We talk about trust. When I got here in 2013, there was absolutely no trust in the Detroit Police Department. However, it changed. It changed because we start working very deep in our communities and building those kind of relationships.
On Detroit City Council, I chair a numerous task force, the Gun Violence Task Force, the Retiree Task Force, Disability Task Force, as well as the Returning Citizens Task Force. I chair Budget, Finance, and Audit, and I'm Vice Chair of Planning. So when we talk about leadership, it is specifically about delivering.
My administration would be a we administration and not a me administration. We need to stop inviting constituents to the table after we come up with a plan. They need to be a part of the creation of the plan.
Now, while there, I talked with Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Republican State House Speaker Matt Hall, and Attorney General Dana Nessel during our special edition of The Pulse from Mackinac Island on Thursday night. If you didn't catch it, we urge you to do so. It was a really informative show. You can scan the QR code on your screen. It's one-stop shop for all of that leadership and all of that thought that is going on Mackinac Island, all in one show. Just head to fox2detroit.com or the Fox local app. You can check out the show right there as well. The race for mayor is one of the many things we're talking about with Sherry Gay Dagnago and Terry Johnson about next on The Pulse, what they see as the priorities for the city and all the other hot topics. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. We're following a developing story where hundreds of kids were kicked out of the Detroit Job Corps as the program shuts down unexpectedly. Sources telling us it's because of recent cuts from the Department of Labor. It trained young people for a variety of job skills. Many kids lived at that facility, and look at that. It's just such a terrible thing to see in paper, in these bags just kind of moving out. Our crew saw dozens of kids with garbage bags filled with belongings, loading them into cars. We're told some of the kids don't actually have a place to go and weren't given a warning. We did reach out to the Department of Labor, Fox 2 did, and we are going to be on it. We continued to reach out to them to ask them exactly what happened here, why the cuts. But you know what? A lot of people are saying the answer is pretty obvious. Joining us now to talk about a number of other issues, including that, attorney and conservative advocate Terry Johnson and former Democratic State Representative Sherry Gay Dagnago. Good to see you both.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here.
Let's begin there. You and I just came back from Mackinac.
Yes.
This thing happened just hours ago. I imagine that on that Mackinac stage, people would be talking about this.
If it happened
before.
Yeah.
Sherry, is this a I told you so moment for Democrats to say, look, this DOJ stuff is really hurting people?
So here's the thing. I don't think in this current environment we can really take that approach to say, I told you so. Because the one thing I will agree with the governor on is making sure that we somehow try to reason, and all the finger pointing back and forth is not going to make sure that we don't have children who are carrying their things out in plastic bags.
Great point.
I have to say that we have to reach beyond ourselves and lead and try to have the tough conversations and put a face with a story. So it's not just an article, a quote, or something that people are reading, but when you see a picture like this on the screen with children carrying their things out in bags, that's real, that's humanity. And none of us can afford to allow that to happen to children who in many instances have nowhere else to go.
Terry, one of the first things that happened when Elon Musk got the job was people said, this is really crazy because this guy is out of touch. He's the world's richest man who doesn't understand how the cuts affect real people. The pictures we're seeing right now on the television, do you wish Elon Musk could see this? And do you think they could have done a better job at how they decided to cut?
My thoughts on that are, I don't know that whether Elon could understand it or not, but I think the real question is, it's not what happened today, which again is a tragedy, and I agree with you, Sherry, that this is not something anybody wants to see, but what got us to this position? This just, Trump just didn't wake up one day and we're here. This has been going on for years, both under Democratic and Republican leadership. And unfortunately, the toll has just come home today in these pictures.
But Terry, the Department of Labor they did go through a series of cuts under DOGE, and that is what we're understanding and surmising. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and correlation and causation are two different things. We got to find out what happened here. But if it is as it appears, that it is because of cuts to the Department of Labor that we're seeing this program end, what would you as a Republican tell your leadership in Washington?
Well, I think the first thing is it's got to be people first. That's really what needs to happen. And Sherry, I agree with you. Again, it's twice already.
That's
here.
amazing. This
I know,
is a
2 times already.
It must be the red.
And you're wearing the blue.
We're going to get you there.
Got it.
But the situation really comes down to this. We can't have our future, which are the kids, in this type of situation.
Sure.
And when we have leaders who are not looking at, I'm not worried about the bottom line as I am the human line. And we have to find a way to make these cuts realistic where it's not hurting people in these types of situations.
And I'm happy to hear Terry say that, because in this instance, there are a myriad of programs that children who have no other place to go, no other support system, pulling the safety net from under them is going to exacerbate the problem.
Right.
Poverty is here. It's a reality. Let's address it. And a program like this was bringing the tools together to support them, bring them to the place where many of them can matriculate, get their graduation certificates, get in programs where they can go on to higher education. But right now we're faced with cuts like this. It's going to increase homelessness.
It is.
Yes, go ahead.
But it is, but here's the other part. I think it's also time that we step up as well, because again, part of the problem has been we've always relied on the federal government.
Sure.
The federal government, we are the federal government, but in the sense, years and years ago, we had the churches and other organizations that would step up in these, types of situations. And then we need to get back to that and not depend on Uncle Sam, but we need to
Terry, I do have to ask you the question. That's restructuring the infrastructure of how nonprofit work is done, and that's a tall order. They basically came out and said we got to make these cuts. My question to you is this: at the Mackinac Policy Conference, I talked to so many Republicans who are friends of mine and people who care deeply about this community, and they said there's a difference between the MAGA right Republican who just agrees wholeheartedly with anything this president does, and then there's conservative, compassionate people who are just old school Republicans who say, wait a minute, Rick Snyder helped expand the Medicaid program in the state of Michigan. Rick Snyder worked and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. What happened to that part of the Republican Party? Do they still have influence?
Well, I think there's still influence there, but I think, as we look at it right now, the problem is, again, and I'm going to say this even on the Democratic side, it's the fringes that are both on the right and the left that are controlling everything. Sherry and I, believe it or not, we do get along. And, there's a lot of good ideas out there. But when you get the people that are on the extreme, whether it's right or left, and they start getting on the news and they're the ones that are controlling the narrative, that's where the problem begins.
But it's our responsibility as leaders to take that back. And so being intentional about having the conversations. Look, I served with Speaker Matt Hall, and I reminded him of one of his first weeks on the job when he came to the House floor holding his blue back. I was one of the first Democrats to sign and co-sponsor his legislation at the time.
I see that.
And initially, his mindset was not working with people who look like me in some instances.
Sure.
And so we had that brief conversation on Mackinac, and we talked about it with a council member. He said, you're absolutely right. That's what we got to get back to, of having the tough conversations,
I agree.
working across the aisle, because
Right.
this is not just going to hurt the city of Detroit and urban centers, it's going to hurt all of Michigan.
I want to mention something. I posted a picture of Haley Stevens, the Democrat, of course, Congresswoman, and Matt Hall, the person you're talking about, the Republican who's a big Trump loyalist. And I got this awful response on Facebook. People saying,
Really?
why are they together? They shouldn't be chummy with each other. I said, are you kidding me? The fighting that happens on social media is so awful, and let's
It
just
is.
call it what
It
it is.
is.
Real people in real life don't even act like that.
Right.
And Matt Hall and Haley Stevens went to high school together, I believe. They're friends. They know each other. One last question I want to get in here. We have about 40 seconds left.
Oh, my.
The mayoral election. I want to ask you what you thought about what you saw out on Mackinac, Sherry.
I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I have to say, as a former colleague of Fred Durhal, I was proud to see his performance during the debate. I think that all the candidates bring an individual perspective that is unique in its own way. I think we still have a lot of time to hear from them, and that's what we need to make sure that we hear from all the candidates.
Terry, a quick name or two that stood out for you in general, just
in
in this
general,
race.
I was surprised by Pastor Kinlock.
Got it.
He continues to move forward. And again, not that he's a bad person, but he's really gaining a lot of traction. That's really surprising. On the other side, I'm really surprised James Craig, who's a friend, hasn't gained the traction that he's supposed to at this point. So as Sherry said, there's a lot of time left, but a lot of work to be done.
And I have to say that people love the compassion of Bishop Kinlock. I think we're in this space where a lot of people are looking at experience versus what they consider having no experience.
Yeah.
And I think the voters are starting to show us that you can't always depend on political experience, but it's what comes from the heart touches the heart. So I think we still have a lot to hear
Name ID
from all the
versus
candidates.
name ID versus what you're actually hearing. Sherry Gay-Degnago, Terry Johnson, good to see you both.
Thank you.
A conservative and a Democrat who get along. Take notes, right? We're diving into the tariff situation next on The Pulse. Former auto supplier executive Jan Griffiths is in Studio C taking your questions. That's next. It's People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. Here to talk about the latest involving President Trump's tariffs, former auto supply executive Jan Griffiths. Always good to see you, Jan. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, Rube.
Let's talk about this. So we have a couple big headlines, and we got some viewer questions from you. So we're going to take those in a minute. But let's begin with what the president announced on Friday, basically saying, I'm planning on doubling the tariffs on U.S. steel to 50%. What does that do immediately in your mind to the auto industry?
To the auto industry, every auto exec right now is probably just choking. Because imagine all of the steel that we need to build vehicles in this country. Now there's going to be an even bigger tariff, so the knock-on effect to domestic vehicle production will be significant.
But wouldn't putting a tariff on the steel for all those other nations help the steel industry here in the U.S.?
The steel industry well, to answer your question directly, yes. But the steel industry in the U.S. does not have the capacity and the capability to support all the demand, all the steel that we need for this industry.
And certainly there is a lot that's needed, obviously, to build and continue to contribute to that infrastructure.
Yes.
We do have our first viewer question coming to us, and we always love to include you in the show, my friends at home. And so, Greg, we thank you for your question. You're asking, why are we worried about tariffs when the tech center has loads of new cars just parked there? So Greg's saying we have excess inventory. Jen?
Great observation. Perfectly logical question. It's an issue of timing. So yes, there is inventory in the system. There is inventory in the lots, at the dealerships, and around the area, in the Metro Detroit area for sure. But it's a matter of timing. So as these vehicles are being produced and they cross international borders and the tariffs start to be impacted and start to take place, then the prices start to go up. So it's a matter of timing before we deplete all of the current inventory at the current pricing levels.
We have some kind of developing news out of China right now, where China is basically being accused of not following up on the trade agreement that helped slash their tariffs to 30%. It was like more than 120%. What's going on with that, and what do you fear will happen next?
I am very concerned about this. I fear that this is trade war escalation. It's happening. We sort of relaxed in mid-May because we said, oh, great, China's at the table, we're talking, we have an agreement, there's something in place in Geneva, we're putting a pause for 90 days, all good. But then President Trump came out today and said, no, they violated the agreement. But there were very few specifics around that. Other sources have said that China is slow rolling their agreement and that they're not continuing to export rare earth minerals, which was part of the agreement. And so that is going through a massive escalation right now.
And so the 3-month wait, that 90-day pause, does that hurt that in any way by the president saying that China's not following it? It could. It
could, very much so. And we are starting to see some retaliatory actions as well with licenses, from licenses that we would issue to American companies to ship products to China, the Chinese student visa situation. So this is all escalating right now as we speak.
And we have Tim who's asking another question here on the Pulse. Tim, thanks for your question here. Heard on CNBC that tariffs will soften demand, which will lead to lower prices, i.e. promotional sales. Thoughts?
Seems logical. However, the relationship between tariffs, demand, and pricing is extremely complex. Initially, we wanted to put tariffs in place to make foreign cars more expensive, so that we would buy more domestically produced cars. But what the world has now realized is there's no such thing as a pure American domestically produced vehicle. There are so many vehicles that are produced in other countries by American automakers and so many component parts that are subject to tariffs that the tariff situation is going to hit all vehicles. So prices are going to go up across the board. Unless you had a car that was purely made in America with no parts at all coming from anywhere else. You're talking about a game that involves all of us. Yes. We have another question here on the Pulse. Thank you for your question, Tim. We appreciate it. Ask when the real timeline is to relocate complete supply chain in mass and at the same time for multiple industries, and who pays for all of this new equipment and infrastructure? Great question. Thanks, Excellent question. Yes. Well, as you know, my background is in supply chain. I've spent many years making these sourcing decisions and moving supply chains from complex global environments to maybe nearshoring and bringing them into the U.S. and vice versa. So it all starts off with a very simple decision about what is the cost of the current product, what is the cost to bring it into another country, what does that look like? It's called a total acquisition cost. You can't actually put that together when this tariff situation is moving all the time, because that variable keeps changing. But to answer the question directly, in order for these complex supply chains to move, it takes time. It can take anywhere from 6 months for a simple part to years for more complex components. And who pays for that? It is the company that is responsible for manufacturing either the component part for the vehicle or the vehicle. They're paying the tooling typically on the capital required. It changes by the day, and that's why this is a nightly show. We will come back, of course, and update you as we have new developments, and we'll lean on Jan for a lot of that help. Thank you, Jan, for your time today. Pleasure. And that is the Pulse for tonight. We thank you so much for joining us. You can always email us your political questions that you want answered or a fact check you want to see, left or right. thepulse@fox.com or scan the QR code on your screen. I'm Rup Raj. As usual, it was good to be with you.